Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to my first place tournament report and deck tech. Finally won one. I've got top 3 in Asperia twice in the past. I've got 2 third places and now I have a first, which I'm very pleased with. This is also the deck I was playing on ladder this season and got third with, although I probably could have done better if I had been playing more. Yeah, I probably could have got first or second. Maybe not first, because Clone was playing a deck that kind of counters mine, but I definitely could have done better in the third. I was a bit lazy. Anyway, so what we're going to do for this video is go over the deck and sideboard extensively. I'm not going to include gameplay because you can check out the broadcasts on Twitch for gameplay. I'll put the main one in the description so you can go check that out. Then we're going to go over game by game and talk a little bit how I played the games against different archetypes and also how sideboarding worked. So anyway, on to the deck itself. First things first, no 1-drops. It's an order Dominion Soldiers deck, and the reason why we don't have any 1-drops is because Basic Alexa is amazing. Getting Militia on turn 1 is a massive consistency boost, which means you don't have to play any 1-drops, which lower your consistency later, which means that Soldiers actually has a decent late game for an aggro deck. It's a very aggressive deck, but the Dominion Splash gives you a lot of late game, which you normally wouldn't have. So I went with Dominion instead of what some people do, which is play Corruption, or even Mono. But I do think that Dominion is worth the slight consistency loss with having to go 2 levels of one of each color. But it also means you get some extra late game, which gives you a higher win percentage. So I'm very happy with the Dominion Splash. But yeah, the Militia are actually very good. Well, I mean, going first, you can't play a 2-drop because you don't have the Spark. But it means you can go Militia on 1 into Spark Cavalry Field Captain to make it a 2/2 with 3 speed to kill an Elf Warrior. Or you can play a Night Recruiter, which gets bigger, or a Vanguard, all on turn 2. And if you're going second, you can go double 2-drop without wasting a slot in your hand for a 1-drop. And going first, it always makes sure that you have a 1-drop on turn 1, which is very important. On to the 2-drops. Now we'll talk about the 2 creatures and then the 2 spells. First things first, Dwarf Musketeer. Now, Dwarf Musketeer is the run-of-the-mill soldier. It's very consistent. It does have some serious weaknesses because of that 1 health, but we'll talk about that a bit with the sideboard. But the fact that it's ranged and it's a soldier means that it works very well with all the synergies in the deck. It means that you can play it on turn 2, and then later on you can convert it into a +1/+1 counter. You can also cycle it along with the other 2-drop for soldiers. You can cycle them into your graveyard with Stronghold Metropolis and then turn them into a +1 counter in the late game, which is very important with both shrines. And on top of that, he trades very well with things like elves. Very difficult to deal with for elves because if they don't kill it, then Cavalry Field Captain will kill one of their elves for free. On to the other 2-drop, Heavy Infantry. Heavy Infantry is a weird card, but it's actually been fairly good. Now, the reason Heavy Infantry has been good is actually because of how hard it is to stop. It's remarkable how difficult it is to block a Heavy Infantry, because if you give it a +1/+1 buff, which there's a lot of ways of doing in this deck, it becomes a 3/4. And 3/4s don't really die to anything. You're not going to Helm or Ray of Righteousness or Karthus a Heavy Infantry. But you can't block it with Library Guards. You can't block it with a Phoenix. You just can't block it. Even Mutant has issues against it because it gives so many stats for the mana cost, and the Mutant actually can't keep up with all the extra soldiers you're putting out. So Heavy Infantry has been remarkably powerful, and I actually like having the Heavy Infantry instead of the other 2-drop I could have used, which is Sunblessed Priest, because it also works with the Soldier synergy, although we'll get to Sunblessed Priest a little later. Now onto the 2 spells. These are what I like to call the Combat Ruiners, because they both make combat miserable for your opponent. First things first is Pacify, the go-to removal spell in order. The thing about Pacify is it's a tempo-based card. And the reason it works so well here is because soldiers excel at combat on their turn. The reason for this is because of temporary buffs like Cavalry Field Captain and also buffs from hand like Master Tactician and Soldier's Memorial, along with the fact that you're playing Mind Extort and Mutant, meaning that there's a lot of manipulation on your turn, and combat on your turn is very powerful. However, on their turn, they have the advantage in that regard, so you don't have Cavalry Field Captain buffs, things like that. So if they attack, you just leave 2 mana open, and you can either go Pacify or Guards, and they both completely mess up combat. While I'm on the topic of Guards, the reason Guard is so strong, in fact it's one of the best cards in the deck, is because along with Pacify, you can leave up 2 mana, and if they don't attack, you just make 2 Militia end of turn. And if they do attack, you just Pacify or Guards and mess up their combat. And on top of that, you can actually use it against big threats like Andriel, the chump block. This actually came up in one of the tournament games, was using Guards just to stall for massive amounts of time. It's a very, very powerful card and should not be underestimated. One of the best spells in the game. It's that good. On to the 3-drops. Now, the 3-drops are actually where this deck truly comes into its own, as we've got 3 incredibly powerful 3-drops. We'll start with Night Recruiter. Night Recruiter is one of those cards that has always been a bit hit or miss because of the inclusion of like Fire Blast in some decks. However, in a sideboard tournament, you just side them out against red. It's quite incredible, actually. On top of that, with Master Tactician, if you get Master Tactician with a +1/+1 counter on him, the Night Recruiter doesn't die anymore. Or if you put a +1/+1 on Night Recruiter, which I have done before, and it's just a very, very potent card. Being able to get up to 5/5 or 6/6 on a 3-drop very easily is critical. On top of that, the extra Militia it comes with actually functions as a alternating turn draw with Stronghold Metropolis, because Stronghold Metropolis has a 1-turn cooldown, but Alexa's Hero Power has a 2-turn cooldown, which means you can only draw once every 2 turns. Or if you have a Night Recruiter, you can actually play the Night Recruiter, draw off the Militia, and you still get the Night Recruiter, and the Night Recruiter will probably be a 4/4 at that stage, or maybe a 3/3. But the point is, you just spent 3 mana to draw a card and get a 3 mana 3/3, which is amazing. So Night Recruiter is very, very good at all stages in the game. He's a little weak on 3 sometimes, although multiples get a bit absurd against some decks, and he is completely unstoppable in some matchups, requiring basically hard removal. On top of that, he's a massive threat that if they're playing Dominion and they helm him, he becomes a 1/1 and is not a threat at all. So very, very powerful card for soldiers. On to Cavalry Field Captain, which actually got, I think it was number 3 on my top 10 creatures list. It was 3 or 4, I think it may have been 3. But Cavalry Field Captain is one of the best creatures in the game, and it's incredibly hard to play around, especially with soldiers. The reason it's so hard to play around with soldiers is because the buff makes Militia into 2/2s with 3 speed, not 2, since Militia get an extra +1 speed from the buff itself. So being able to go Militia into Cavalry Field Captain on turn 2 with Spark will completely nullify whatever your opponent can do, and it's actually what makes Assassin really bad against soldiers sometimes. If you have Assassin going second, you need to Spark it, otherwise it's going to be useless. And if you have it going first, then you play it on turn 2, and then they play Cavalry Field Captain and kill it with a Militia of all things. So Cavalry Field Captain is amazing against both Elves and Assassin, being able to buff up Militia. The other reason it's very good against Elves is you can buff up Musketeer, and by buffing up Musketeer, you can get it up to 3/2 with range and 3 speed, meaning it can kill an Elf commander, which is insane, quite frankly. And Cavalry Field Captain's other major function is pushing damage later with things like Mutant or Night Recruiter, putting them up to 3 speed, making them much harder to block. Very, very good 3-drop, and was actually the reason why I had Instill Life in this deck for a while, although I did take it out eventually since it just wasn't very consistent. Elite Vanguard. Now, Elite Vanguard is the bread and butter soldier of this deck. Being 3/3 for 2 mana later on in the game is critical, and it also works with the soldier land and all the soldier buffs, and it's just very relevant at any point in the game. Being able to put down a 3/3 with 2 speed is always relevant, and later on it's actually a 4/4, and it's just so hard to deal with. It's remarkable how powerful a just vanilla 3/3 is, and it works with the synergies in the deck. So put it all together and you get a very resilient threat. It works amazingly well with Night Recruiter, because if you get it on the board with, say, if you get 2 Elite Vanguards on the board and you have Night Recruiter, it doesn't matter what they Fire Blast, the Night Recruiter's living. And that's really, really brutal. It's also why Heavy Infantry's in this deck, is it works really well against red. And it's just resilient. Having a lot of extra life on the board makes the deck a lot more resilient against red, and I actually found that post-sideboard this deck is favored against red, which is baffling to me. Alright, on to the marquee card of soldiers, Master Tactician. Master Tactician is one of those cards that you need in every game, so there's 4. And if you get multiple, it just gets silly. I've had 3 Master Tacticians on the board at once, making them all 5/5s, basically immune to removal, and making every single militia into a 4/4 with 2 speed. And at that point, the game is over. Unless they have a Cataclysm, they can't stop that. It's completely unkillable once you have multiple Tacticians on the board. You basically need hard removal or you're dead. And that's how Master Tactician works. He's a very, very snowball-centric card, makes all of your militia into good blockers now, and pumps up all of your kind of terrible soldiers into very, very powerful cards. Also, it's very important against advanced Darius decks, which became very relevant in the tournament itself, since there was a couple of advanced Darius decks running around. Master Tactician basically negates the damage on the hero power, and they have to flash freeze it and then use it, or if you get 2, they just can't do anything, because they need double flash freeze, and that's very unlikely. Alright, we'll finish out the creatures, and then we'll go on to the other 2 spells. Blood-Seeking Mutant. Another very powerful creature. There's a theme in this deck. It's basically using all of the very, very powerful synergistic creatures, and then it's got Blood-Seeking Mutant, the late-game punch in this deck. Also allows you to make combat even more favored on your turn, since you can play it from hand, weaken something, and then kill it. So the Mutant itself has been astonishingly good. It was a 3-of, it's now a 4-of, because it's just so necessary. It's very powerful in every single matchup. It's not bad against anything. It's even good when they have no creatures, because you can siphon your creatures onto the Mutant to get through things like Force Field, which does come up, and you can also do it just to kind of convert your heavy infantry into 3 damage over turns. That does happen sometimes. And it also lets you kill your own soldiers, and by doing so you actually get a might counter, which means you can increase the damage from a soldier. It's weird how that works. If you kill your own heavy infantry with a mutant over time, you get +3/+3 from 2 attack, and then you get a might counter. So you just convert a 2-drop into 4 damage over 2 different creatures, since you put the might counter on something different. I keep mentioning this might counter, and it's very, very relevant. The other thing it works with Mutant is that if you play Mutant and then you use Soldier's Memorial on the Mutant, it goes up to 4/4, which means it stops dying to all the red burn spells. They basically have to Dragon Fire it, and if they're Dragon Firing a Mutant, they've pretty much already lost. On to the spells. Running 2 spells here, Ray of Righteousness over Helm. I used to run Helm. Helm's now on the sideboard because Helm is too vulnerable to artifact removal and lost me a couple of games when I was doing this in testing. However, Ray of Righteousness is just a catch-all. It doesn't take out everything, but it takes out everything relevant, quite frankly. Ray of Righteousness deals with everything I can't, like a lot of the Angels and Blood-Seeking Mutants, and it helps to deal with Phoenixes and things like that, and it's just a very, very useful card. Also works against Red Dragon. That does come up sometimes. So Ray of Righteousness is one of those cards that honestly is very underestimated, and I think is worth running. 3 Mind Extort. Mind Extortion has become one of the most important spells in the game recently. Just the ability to rip apart your opponent's hand is very relevant. There's actually a 4th one in the board because you need it in certain matchups. You need multiples in certain matchups. It's very powerful against every deck. Every deck has spells. Even Nature is running Landslide and Tornado Outbreak that you really don't want to deal with. It lets you deal with tricks on your turn, again making combat favored on your turn and miserable on their turn. That's one of the reasons why this deck is so powerful, is that combat manipulation. The most important spells to hit with this are Cataclysm, Fire Blast, and probably Pacify. Those are the main ones. Those are all really, really important, although you can actually Mind Extort, if you know what you're playing against. I've actually done Mind Extort on turn 1 just to get rid of a New Horizons, because then it makes the rest of their hand really bad. And that does come up a lot. So Mind Extort's one of those catch-all cards again. This deck was built around consistency. I've always favored consistent decks over just blatantly powerful decks, and that's the difference in design. Now, for Shrine Count, we actually have a... I'll read off the numbers here. We've got a 12-9 split. I've said this before, I actually like 12-9 splits, where the 12-9 split involves if you have a 2-color deck that requires both by turn 3, then you have 12 of the one you want to start with and 9 of the one you want by turn 3. That's how that works. In practice, it just works the best. Now I've got 2 Soldiers' Memorials, 2 Stronghold Metropolis. I do not have 3 of either, and the reason for that is because if you have 3, you will top deck them later, and then you can't use them. Whereas, and this is only a 2-level deck, and there's no New Horizons, obviously, since it's not blue, so you can't fish them out of your deck. But you need them in the long games especially. You do not need Soldier's Memorial or Stronghold Metropolis in short games. Both of them are fairly useless. They're only useful in long games and against control decks especially, but mid-range and control decks basically. In long games you need both of them at some point. And you will get both of them at some point, especially if you're Divine Offering every single turn or every other turn, which will probably happen anyway. You'll get both of these shrines at some point, and they both serve a very important purpose. Soldier's Memorial gets more out of each soldier, where you turn each soldier into basically 1.5 cards, so you value your opponent out. Only has a 1-turn cooldown, 1 mana investment. It's so powerful in that regard. And Stronghold Metropolis being 0 mana, draw off a militia, or if you have them on the board, or you can just use a hero power for 1 mana draw card, which is absolutely insane, and is one of the reasons why this deck is so strong. Alright, let's get on to the sideboard, and then we'll talk about the how the tournament actually went. Now, the sideboard here is an interesting one, because some of you may know this from my Advanced Never sideboard, but I play a lot of 3-ofs in my decks, and I actually, in sideboarding, I increase 3-ofs to 4-ofs, and then I include extra techs. So, the 3-3-ofs I increased to 4-ofs were Pacify, Heavy Infantry, and Mining Store. Mining Store, fairly obvious, you need it against combo decks and control decks especially, and also against red, so 4 Mining Store makes sense in that regard. 4 Pacify is an interesting one, because you don't actually bring in the 4th Pacify that often, but sometimes you need to. If you're against a heavy creature deck, if you're against a Path mid-range deck, you need 4. And if you're against heavy Phoenixes, having 4 Pacify, 3 Helm basically means the Phoenixes are completely useless. So this color combo actually deals with Phoenix the best out of any color combo, any color combo possible. So the other thing that happens here is if you're against an aggro deck and you really don't want Helm or Ray, you can actually side out the Rays and side in 1 Mind Extort, 1 Pacify, and that will pretty much deal with it. Also against Implants. If you're playing against an Implant deck, which I did actually, then the 4th Pacify is very handy. 4th Heavy Infantry is mostly for red because you get to put extra health on the board, which is very relevant against Fire Blast. It gives you extra 2-drops if you want to be hyper aggressive. You can actually go for 8 2-drops. Well, technically 12 with guards, but you can side in the 8th 2-drop and just go full aggro. And against red, you side in the Heavy Infantry and also Sunblessed Priest, which we'll get to, and then you just have a bunch of 2-drops that don't die to pings. Now, Sunblessed Priest is a 4-of. I used Sunblessed Priest a lot from the sideboard. I sided it in a lot of games. I'm trying to think of any games I didn't side it in, actually. Yeah, I didn't side it in the first game, I think. Yeah. But Sunblessed Priest came in against Advanced Darius. It came in against red. It basically anything can deal 1 damage easily. So like red Dominion, Advanced Darius, and Corruption. If there was Corruption, I would bring in Priest, I think. But the thing about Sunblessed Priest is that Dwarf Musketeer is a lot more reliable in Game 1 than Sunblessed Priest, because Sunblessed Priest doesn't have much synergy with the actual deck. It's just a decent 2-drop. It does have a lot of synergy with the other sideboard threat, which we'll get to in a little bit. But with the actual deck itself, it's not very synergistic. It does lower your soldier count, which is a bit dangerous, and usually when I side in Sunblessed Priest, I also side in the 4th Heavy Infantry, although there is a couple exceptions to that law. So yeah, the Sunblessed Priest is important to have simply because it doesn't die to ping effects, and it also has Lifebound, which helps against other aggro decks when racing. Also a very powerful threat with Path, which we'll get to in a little bit. We'll actually talk about that last, since I think it's the most important card in the sideboard, and it's in its own category. So Sunblessed Priest is important just because of the 2 health, and I would recommend anyone playing soldiers to have 4 in the sideboard. It's a very, very good way of diversifying your threats. Helm of Dominion, 3 helms. 3 helms, not 4, because 4 is too clunky. They come in against decks that do not have artifact removal, like Corruption Dominion, or like Order Dominion. Things like that. Helms are very, very useful in those matchups. It also comes in against Phoenix, because I don't want to deal with Phoenixes. As I said, 4 Pacify, 3 Helms is enough to deal with Phoenix, no matter what. And it's been pretty critical. Helm is one of the best cards in the game, and you can bring it in certain matchups when you kind of get a feel for what your opponent has in their sideboard. So I brought it in Game 3 in the finals, and we'll talk about that when we get to the actual tournament report. Cathedral of the Night. Cathedral of the Night was for red aggressive decks, and depending on the deck itself, I would decide what to side out in the lands for Cathedral. So, playing against Advanced Zash, I would side out Stronghold Metropolis and put in Cathedral because I need the might counters. And against red aggro, I would actually side out the Soldier's Memorial because the draw is more important because I need to get to my my threats. Whereas Cathedral will stall out the game a little bit. So I did bring in Cathedral in one game, and it was very, very useful. Path to Transcendence. Now, Path to Transcendence was arguably the card of the tournament. A lot of decks are playing it. It was very powerful. The thing about Path is that main decking Path requires you to have one of two things. Either a very stall-heavy deck, or a deck that can take the tempo loss. Now, those do have a lot of overlap, but I'll explain. So, Clone was playing a Path deck, but his entire deck was revolved around stalling the game out with creatures, and playing very mid-rangey style, which meant Path could actually work in that regard. And Path was a sideboard strategy for a lot of people because you can bring it in against control decks when you have the time. The problem with Path is that against aggressive decks, it does absolutely nothing. You play Path and then you die. That's pretty much how Path works. So I can't play at main board, pretty much. Although I have, depending on the metagame, I think I would maybe play 2 in the main deck. But the metagame was a bit too quick to play Path, so I didn't. Although if I had known the exact structure of the tournament and the people there, then I would have played 2 Path in the main deck and had 1 in the sideboard. I did bring in Path in quite a few matches, and I maybe should have brought it in all of them, actually. Although not all of them, in most of them. I only brought it in 2 matches, and I probably should have brought it in 3. So anyway, that's the whole deck and sideboard. I'm now going to go over the tournament itself. So, in round 1, and this was hilarious, by the way, I played against Clone, of all people. Pretty much the only player I was scared of. Because Clone is actually, I would say, better practice than me right now. Depending on how much either of us is playing, we kind of, vary. But at the moment, I would say that he's a better practice player than I am. He got 2 accounts to top 10, and he got 2nd last season. I think he should have got 1st, but he got 2nd. And just that fact alone, on top of the fact that I know what deck he's playing, which was a Knight's mid-range deck, which used Namir heavily with, what's it called? The Knight that readies itself. I just need to check the name of this, because I do not use this card much. Yeah, Knight Escort. So use Knight Escort with Namir and Carryfield Captain to just completely outvalue the opponent with the Namir ability. On top of that, he had Path and also Karthus, so his deck hard countered mine, more or less. Not necessarily hard countered, but it was pretty brutal as a matchup, since he was basically playing a slightly slower version of Soldiers, he was playing the same colors, and it was also a slightly slower version, and generally the rule goes you either have to be slightly slower or much faster to beat someone in a card game. Because if you're much faster, they can't keep up with you, and if you're slightly slower, then you're playing at a similar speed to them, but you have slightly increased value on each card, which means you will eventually win. So, Game 1 went very, very well for me, which I was not expecting, since I kind of needed the sideboard, I felt, to actually do well against him. So, Game 1 I did okay. I ended up getting a bit of a blitz start with multiple Knight Recruiters, and he just couldn't stop them. So I ended up squeezing out enough damage on turn 7 before he could get the Karthus train going. Game 2 with sideboarding, I actually should have sided in the Path, but I didn't. I sided in, I think it was Mind Extort and Helms, and also the 4th Pacify, since I knew there was going to be a few issues, to say the least, coming my way with Path of Transcendence. So I ended up siding in Helms and Pacify. I should have sided in Path, but I didn't, since I wasn't really sure about Path in that matchup, although I should have sided it in. And as far as cards to side out, heavy infantry wasn't really performing in that match, so I sided out some heavy infantries to make the room. Now, for game 2, I got completely crushed. He got multiple paths out, he just completely stalled me, and there was nothing I could do. And the Namirs just crushed me. I didn't draw any helms, I didn't draw any way of removing things, and I just got destroyed. I also took out, I think, Ray of Righteousness for helms, which was a mistake that I rectified in Game 3. So in Game 3 I went back to sideboard, and I put in 2 Rays as well, and just went full removal. 3 helms, 2 Rays, 3 Pacify, I think. I took out the 4th one. And just said, I'm going to control the board, and I'm going to try and squeeze in damage while I can. And in Game 3, the game was very, very close. I think I was slightly ahead, and then he just drew 5 lands and died. This is actually a topic that's been going on in the forums recently a lot, which has been shrine flooding and shrine screwing being a problem. And Clone did lose because he just drew a bunch of shrines. I actually messaged him immediately after. He said, like, I got a message saying, oh, GG, and I'm like, did you just have 5 shrines? He's like, yes. So, yeah, that wasn't a particularly good 3rd game, but it was a very difficult series. I actually had technical issues after game 1 where my computer just completely crashed and then had Windows updates, and it took ages, and it took 20 minutes to rectify, and he was very, 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 very polite in waiting, which I was grateful for, since that would have been very irritating to go down to the lower bracket just because of computer issues. Then in round 2, I played against Swap Blues, who was playing Wisdom Dominion Control, which is a very easy matchup for me, although he was playing Advanced Darius, which could cause some issues. Now, game 1, I just blitzed him out. He couldn't keep up. And game 2, he had Assassins, and he sided in a lot of different things. I just sided out all of my pacifiers, put in the 4th Mind Extort, and just left in the Rays, I think. Just went full aggro, so I took out the 4 Musketeers and put in 4 Sunblessed Priests, because Musketeer isn't very good against the ping effects from Mutant and also from Cathedral of the Night, and his hero power. Put in the 4th Heavy Infantry, and just went full heavy 2-drop aggro. That's what I did for game 2. I also put in 3 Path, and in game 2 I got down a Path in the mid-game, and he just couldn't answer it. I got down some aggro, he stabilized, and then I just went Path and killed him, and he couldn't kill the Path, and he just could not deal with it. I don't think he was expecting Path out of the board, so he didn't have any gnomes, and he just died. There was nothing he could do against the Path. I think it was Master Tactician, actually, that I had under the Path, I can't remember, but I think it was Master Tactician, and I just beat him to death with it. So, very, very easy match, although control has never been too tricky for soldiers, and with the sideboard strategy of Path of Transcendence, it's just ridiculous. Now, on to the 3rd series, I played against Rimuel, who ended up getting 3rd, and he was playing a Dominion Rage Implants deck, and in game 1, it was actually fairly close. Game 1, I did have a Pacify for one of his implants. On the 2nd time I attacked, he got me on the 1st one and got a card advantage through that. Then I pacified the other one, and I kept the board locked down with Bloodseeking Mutants, and then I just filled the board with high HP creatures, and he couldn't get past them. I did Mind Extort him, and he had 2 Fire Blasts, so I had to kind of bait a Fire Blast, which was a bit awkward, but it ended up going quite well. Then in game 2, I sided in Helms and the 4th Extort, along with the same strategy of siding out Musketeers, 4 Sunblasts, and also siding in the 4th Heavy Infantry to deal with red. Then in game 2, I just picked apart his hand and just helmed his implanted creature and took over the game, and I won in the mid game because he just couldn't respond to any of that. I also sided in Cathedral and stayed at, I think I activated Cathedral 3 times and ended up at 16 life, so he couldn't even burn me out. And I took a Dragonfire out of his hand, so between the 4th Extort and also the Cathedral, I ended up gaining 11 life or something. It was utterly ridiculous, and the post-board match was even worse for him than the pre-board match. As I said, I think this deck is actually favored against red decks post-board because I can side into all of these high HP threats in early turns, and it lowers how much I rely on things like Night Recruiter. I actually sided out 2 Night Recruiters in that game. Just went for 2 Night Recruiters and heavy 2-drops instead. Now, I didn't get to play a game for a while at this point because it was double elimination, so we had to watch Rajan, who was the only person streaming. He was playing one turn heal with a transformational sideboard into Angels. I'll talk about that a bit when I do my tournament recap tomorrow, where I'll go over the top 4 decks, since 3 of them are on mom cards, and then also Bolter put up the 4th place. So I'll go over the top 4. But he was playing a one turn heal deck. So was Pedro, actually. That was an interesting one. They were both playing one turn heal decks, and they both had transformational sideboards where they went into Angels as a backup plan in game 2. Rajan ended up playing its clone after he lost to me, and he knocked clone out of the tournament. He then proceeded to beat Swap Blues as well, and he beat Pedro. It was a one-turn heal mirror match, which was a strange game to watch, and ended up going through Rimuel as well, going into the finals. So I ended up having to win 1 best of 3, whereas he had to win 2. So my games against Rajan were some of the most interesting I played in the entire tournament. Game 1, I just had the soldier start and I just ran over him. Then in game 2, I made the mistake of seeing, I saw some of his sideboard strats, but he didn't really transformational sideboard at all during any of the previous games, so it caught me really off guard, and I actually sided out my my removal, and I just sided in Path, Mind Extort, Priest, because he was playing Advanced Darius, and I didn't side in the Heavy Infantry because I didn't have room since I needed the Path, and I sided out Pacify and Ray, and you get the idea. Then in game 2 came the Path Antriel Guardian shenanigans, which I was not expecting, and in game 2 I was losing for a very long time. In fact, I think the last 10 turns I had no chance of winning, and I stayed in the game for a very long time. I stalled with guards to stop him from attacking with Antriel, and I stalled for long enough to force him to show his sideboard strat, like pretty much all of it. I saw a lot of cards. I think I saw 40 cards in his deck or something in game 2, since I stalled for long enough. And as a result, I could tell that he didn't have Word of Grace in his deck anymore. Or if he didn't have Word of Grace, if he left it in, it was a very, very low count of them. It was not 4. So, keeping that in mind for game 3, I thought, well, maybe he can slide back Word of Grace and go for the combo kill again. So I left 4 Mind Extorts in, and what I did was I sided in 2 Helms, 3 Pacify, because he's on Path, which means Pacify is more important, and Helm works against Guardian. So then in game 3 we played a reasonably drawn out game where we both had a Path on the board, and he had Library Guard's Path and I had Night Recruiter Path with Stronghold Metropolis, so we were both drawing cards every single turn and just valuing each other out. And then I got just enough attack on the board, and he had to play a Guardian to block damage, and I had the Helm and I just helmed the Guardian and attacked him, and that was the lethal hit there, and me winning the tournament. So I will say that the 2 series that I had the most trouble in was expected. It was Clone and Rajan, which honestly I was not surprised by because they're both very good players. Rajan did say he made quite a few mistakes in the finals, but he didn't think they would have affected the outcome. I could probably have watched his view, since I think he streamed the finals, but I didn't. Or I haven't yet, and the main tournament stream was going over my view, since they had been watching Rajan for about an hour and a half at that point, or 2 hours, playing all of his games in the lower bracket. But anyway, the tournament itself was actually quite well run. It was fairly smooth this time. We didn't have any delays anywhere, and we ran sideboard again, which I was very happy about, although I would like to see Swiss in the future. Double elimination isn't that bad. It's not single elim. But Swiss is just more fun for more people, I think, because you get to play more games. Whereas with double elim, you lose 2 and you're out, which sounds very forgiving, but then for some people that are trying to learn how to play Spellweaver and they just want to play in a tournament and they get knocked out, and it's fine to not... I mean, if you're not expecting to win, which I think a lot of people aren't, they just want to play in a tournament because it's fun. If playing double elim is a bit disheartening because you only get to play 2 games if you lose both of them, and you don't get much experience through that. So I would like to see Swiss in the future, although I think this tournament really did cement sideboarding as the way to go as far as tournaments go, since pretty much everyone prefers sideboarding over over the whole Conquest format. We actually had the two commentators that I was talking to on the Mum Card stream. They got me on for an interview after the finals, and we were talking a bit about this, and we kind of all agreed that we preferred sideboarding, and it also allows you to personalize your deck a bit and takes out the rock paper scissors thing, as noted by the sideboarding. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I go off for this video is that the sideboarding strategies that were more successful were actually proactive and transformational, not reactive. That's just a note. I'll talk about that a bit more in the tournament report when I go over the sideboards for the top 4. But Rajan was playing a transformational sideboard to shift his strategy, to nullify the sideboarding of his opponent, and I was playing a sideboard that made the removal options that are traditionally good against my deck worse. Like Sunblessed Priest, Heavy Infantry, things like that. And both of those sideboard strategies worked much better than reactive ones. Like, the only reactive cards I had were pretty much Mind Extort and Helm. That was the only reactive cards I sided in. The rest were proactive. Like, I would say the most important card in my sideboard was arguably Path. Well, I say probably was Sunblessed Priest, but it was arguably Path, and Path is a very, very proactive threat, because the idea is you only have Path in your deck, and they could side in spell removal for Path, which isn't even that brutal, but then they only can deal with Path, and Gnome is very bad against soldiers. Even Unicorn's not that good against soldiers. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, want to ask me any questions about the deck or the tournament, put it in the comment section below. But as for now, it's been Jotto, signing off.